Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest, a podcast dedicated to creativity. My name is Scoob Decker, and I am an artist, and your host. PMI is an exploration in meeting some incredible artists, learning about their craft, and exploring what makes them create. Bronze, copper, brass, lead. These are all hard and rigid metals. But kicking off Season 4, when our first guest Rebecca Fox gets her hands on them, their story changes. She creates, manipulates, welds, forms, and sometimes paints these metal pieces into structures, making them airy, light, pleasing, and full of life. Her specialty is hiding the weld marks to make a continuous flow in each piece. She draws a lot of inspiration from circles, a calming and everlasting shape that your eye is drawn to and around. Rebecca sees endless possibilities to bend, manipulate, and weld these circles into her signature look and showcases sculpting in her unique jewelry. This episode dives into Rebecca's creativity as she explains what is actually happening to the metal, her post-treatment techniques, and her philosophy on what the sculptures mean to her. She was always a student, always learning. After commissioned pieces, she loves to play with the different metals, see what she can do, and see how they react with each other. The possibilities are endless. Her favorite part is making it come to life. Rebecca finds her happy place in her studio. Seeing her tools and materials initiates the flow that is hard to find in the vast and difficult world outside. She explains that it is a very physically demanding craft, and hopes that her body can stay healthy to keep up with her artist's eye to continue creating as long as she can. She says a formal education in metal sculpting isn't necessary, but finding a way to learn the fabrication of the metal will enhance your understanding of the material. This episode was recorded on June 12th in San Francisco at the Islayas Creek Studios, where there are other artists working nearby, so pardon the occasional background clutter. I hope you look up their work and your interest is piqued. I hope you're having a grand day, and please enjoy this week's episode I've titled, Pure to the Metal. Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest. I'm currently in San Francisco, California, sitting in the Islayas Creek studio with an amazing artist. How are you doing today?
Great.
Do anything interesting lately?
I'm just making work.
Just making work. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us who you are. Where are you from?
I am Rebecca Fox, and I'm from Los Angeles, California.
And what is your craft?
Metal sculpture.
Metal sculpture. And what is your specialty within your craft?
I would say it's translating the material, which is metal, which is typically like a hard, heavy object, and making it appear lighter and more delicate.
Yes, and I can safely say that you were very successful at that. Looking behind you, you have some sculptures that are 10, 12 feet tall, and they look very airy and whimsical, and it's very different than other hard metal sculptures. What's your background? Do you have any education in metal sculpting?
So I took classes in sculpture at City College in San Francisco. When I first moved to San Francisco, I actually took a jewelry class, a metal arts class, and I didn't like it because you had to clean the metal and it was very small, and you had to be really precise and particular. And my teacher suggested I might like taking his other class, which was a sculpture class, the next semester. So I took that, and that's where I got introduced to welding. And I took that class. I wasn't taking it for credit or anything. I was just taking it to kind of learn more about sculpture. And then at that time you could repeat the class as much as you wanted. So I just did that to keep using the studio. So that's where I got my training.
Yeah, and you didn't do much metal sculpting before you moved to San Francisco.
No, I never did any before here.
So what brought you to San Francisco?
I just always liked San Francisco, and I had visited a few times growing up, and I thought it was a really interesting place, and I wanted to live here, so I just moved.
And what really piqued your interest about metalwork?
I think just the amazing ability to transform this material in numerous ways. You can work with, when I first started, you could work with like scrap metal and just find stuff on the street, or get pieces like at scrap yards and manipulate the material and make different objects. You could make functional things, but I mean, I was always inclined to make abstract sculpture, but if I needed to make like a table or something, I could do that. So I just like the diversity of the material and what you could do with it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this craft, you can put things from a scrapyard,
Yeah.
and Rebecca Fox can work on it for a bit, and then it's all of a sudden in a gallery, and it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. What makes your work different than other metal sculptors?
Yeah, so, and first when I used to work, just to clarify, I used to do stuff from scrap metal shops, and I mean material, but now I use other material.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, what makes it different? I think just the delicate nature of the piece. And one of the things that I do a lot in my work is I try to hide the welds and put them in like inconspicuous places, or I grind them down so that way the whole visual of the piece has like a continuous flow, so your eye doesn't stop, you know, where the weld is. So that makes it different. And then just the finishes and the patinas that I put on the piece to give it like a cohesive feel.
Yeah, you are very inspired by circles.
Yeah.
Why is that?
You know, I wasn't always. It just well, now it's been many, many, many years, but I think as I just kept working on the pieces, I kept seeing a repeating pattern and repeating element in my work, which was circles. And then I just sort of started really focusing on the circles. I feel like it's a very recognizable shape. It's a very calming shape. There's a sense of continuousness. There's a sense of everlasting. And you can just I can manipulate it into many just various different features and different ways. So I'm just attracted to all the different ways that I can keep working with it, and how it feels like there's endless possibilities with it.
Yeah, I definitely get that sense from that. The circles are very soft, which is very different than a lot of metal work, and the way you hide those welds just make you look at it forever, and your eyes just glaze over the whole piece, and you're just transfixed by it, and I love it.
Thank you.
I personally don't know too much about metal sculpting. I'm very excited to get into that. But from your upbringing in LA and your few classes in San Francisco, what was really your upbringing that turned you into a creator?
Yeah, I think growing up, I was always exposed to art. My mom collected and still does pottery, and so she loved to go to art shows and art fairs, and I would always go with her. And so I was always exposed to art. Also, my uncle, her brother, he actually did metal sculpture. He lived in a different state. He lived in Missouri, but we had a lot of his pieces around our house, so I was always exposed to his work as well. He mainly did wall pieces. He did brazing, which is just a lower temperature than welding. But anyway, so I was exposed to his work. And then, you know, we went to museums, and I was just exposed to a lot of art. I had art classes growing up in school, to some art camps. So I had a lot of exposure to it. And then when I got older, I wasn't like a specific path, like I'm going to be an artist or I'm going to do this for this outcome. It was more, I was just interested in kind of doing something and trying different things. And I thought, I want to try some art classes and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And through this, you've mastered these massive sculptures. You've mastered these smaller sculptures. They range from 12 feet to 6 inches tall. But there's also a whole nother realm of Rebecca Fox that we haven't talked about. You're also a jewelry maker.
Yes.
Can we go into that a little bit? And
Sure.
maybe how do they influence each other?
Yeah, so I think it was about 8 years ago, more or less. I was in a show at a gallery, and I was making wall pieces, because aside from making freestanding pieces, I make wall sculpture. And my pieces were very small and extremely intricate, and I was welding tiny little pieces onto circles and creating textures and designs, and they were extremely intricate and very detailed and very fine work. And as I was working on them, I just thought, you know, these kind of looked like they could be wearable, like jewelry. Of course, they were too big. They were about 3 inches, so it was too big for that. And I had this idea that maybe I could translate some of my pieces into jewelry. And so I was really interested with that process, still working with metal. So so I have a friend who's a professional jeweler, and I talked to her and I took some private classes with her. And I learned some techniques, and then I bought a bunch of new tools, which is always fun and exciting. And then I came back to my studio and just played around and started making jewelry. And I really love doing the jewelry too, because some of the techniques that I've learned from the jewelry, I've been able to use in my larger pieces and vice versa. So that's been kind of an interesting crossover between the two pieces, the two things with sculpture and jewelry.
Yeah, I noticed they're very different. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you do see the similar themes of the circles
Yeah.
in them, but I do think it's different, and
Yeah.
it's very unique to be able to work on something so intricate and small,
Yeah.
and then also be able to work on these massive pieces.
Yeah,
But I think that softness, that beauty,
thank you.
it comes from. I also noticed, speaking of jewelry, that you are wearing the Star of David around
Yes.
your neck. You are Jewish.
Yes.
Do you think that influences your work? Do you think the culture and the heritage influence your work?
So, I mean, being Jewish is who I am, so of course anything that I'm going to be doing is influenced by who I am and how I was raised and what my beliefs are. Definitely feel much more connected to my Judaism since everything that's been happening in the world. And I actually I made this Star of David necklace in response to October 7th. I was extremely upset with everything that was going on and didn't know what to do with myself and didn't feel creative at all. And came into my studio and just would wander around and not feel like wanting to do anything. And then one day, a few days after that had happened, I decided I wanted to make myself a Star of David. And so that's how that came about.
You broke your tradition of circles.
Yes, exactly.
I think it's
Well
worth it.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I've noticed that you have things in galleries. You sell these to homeowners.
Yeah.
I would consider that successful. Do you consider yourself successful in your craft? What is success in your craft? And what really got you succeeding?
Yeah, so I think my idea of what success is has changed over the years. And now what I've settled on, and I really believe, I feel like success is being able to come to my studio. I come almost daily, and being able to work in my studio, that feels like a success to me in terms of just fulfilling this need and desire to want to create and having the beautiful space and the time to do that. And then in terms of the other things that I consider successful, I feel very fortunate that I've sold a lot of my work. I've had a lot of commissions. I've done some public art pieces. So I consider that pretty successful. This past 2 years, I've had 3 museum shows, group exhibitions. So to me, that's a pretty big success as well.
Yeah, and congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. And I've just noticed on social media you've been accepted into a few more galleries.
Yeah. And right now I have a show at the Contemporary Jewish Museum. So that is actually one of the most meaningful shows that I've ever been in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now tell us, how do you start your creation process? Do you have an idea of what you want to make before you start?
So it depends if I'm working on a piece just to make it or if it's a specific project or a commission. If it's a specific commission or a project, then I start from a different point of view because I'm trying to figure out what the project is and what it entails, and there's certain parameters that, maybe it's size or scale or whatever the theme or something that the client wants. So that's a little bit different. In terms of if I'm just coming into my studio and making whatever I want to make, then I typically don't have an idea beforehand. I just come in and start kind of playing around, and then the ideas just come.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about using paint versus patina.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, sure. So that's part of the finishing process. So part of what I like to do is keep the metal like as pure to the metal as I can. There's many different ways that you can finish a piece. You can not finish it at all and let it just rust. But to me, that seems unfinished, and I don't feel like it adds to like the final finish of the work. So anyway, there's a chemical, it's called a patina. There's many different forms of it. It's a liquid. You can do it hot or cold. I usually do a cold one. And you prepare the metal first, and then you coat it, you put it on the metal. You can do various layering and different techniques to achieve like the color that you want. And then you seal it with some kind of sealer. And then that way it just makes a different kind of color on the material.
Does that work with any kind of metal?
Yes, most metals, not all metals, but most metals it does work with. And there's different kinds for, like, there's different ones for if you're working with steel versus bronze or something else.
And what's your favorite kind of metal to work with?
Well, right now it's bronze. So, but to clarify, I do hand fabricated bronze. So I'm not doing like bronze casting. So what that means is I'll buy like a sheet of bronze and then I'll manipulate that bronze into whatever shape or thing that I'm doing. And then in terms of paint, I have painted pieces before, and some of my larger pieces I'm doing powder coating. So that process is really good for outdoor pieces, and it adds like color and pop. And
Yeah, it definitely makes it stand out. I will
Yeah.
say it's a little different than most of your usual stuff, but
Yes.
I think it will fit in with the San Francisco atmosphere.
yeah, yeah.
And what gets your creative juices flowing?
Yeah, I think it's just coming into my studio. Like when I come into my studio and I'm just see all my tools and I see all of my metal, I just start getting excited about the endless possibilities of what I can create.
What inspires you? You talked a little bit how you listen to some music, you might listen to some podcast. We're also on the Candlestick side of San Francisco. You mentioned how you like to go out on Candlestick Point and just walk a little bit.
Yeah, I think being outside, taking walks is really nice. I love the water. I love being surrounded by water. I love the ocean. I love that my studio is on the water. My old studio was on the water. So I think I get inspired by that. And then just being inspired by like time and space to be able to create and play around.
Now, as an artist, I think we all run into a little bit of a creative block. How do you overcome one of those?
So I typically don't have a creative block. More what I have is my own procrastination and my own sort of stopping myself from working. So I typically am not like, don't know what to work on. I typically have so many things that I need to work on or want to work on that somehow that sort of inhibits me from working. So I guess in a way that's sort of a block, but I don't usually have like a creative block, or there's never a lack of what to make or what to do. It's more of just like, how do I logistically do this or what to do. So a lot of times if I'm in that mode of procrastinating, my studio will become extremely clean. So I'll clean everything.
It's gorgeous.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll get everything organized, and I think that helps me to be in the studio and just sort of start getting in the mode of like doing something.
Yeah. Speaking of being in the studio, once again, we're surrounded by a bunch of your sculptures and some helmets and welding gear. In a minute or less, could you explain what welding really is?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the very simple terms is it's taking two pieces of metal and fusing them together with heat. That's very simple terms. Yeah.
So you not in full gear is kind of an oddity right now?
Well, no, I mean, actually, there's a lot of time when you're working in metal sculpture, you're not just welding, you're actually grinding the metal, you're sanding the metal, you're preparing the pieces, you're setting up how they're going to connect to each other. Maybe you're using like magnets to hold pieces together, you're clamping stuff together. So you're not always,
Sparks aren't always flying.
No, yeah, they're not always flying. So that's part of it, but there's other aspects to it as well.
What's your favorite part?
I think just getting an idea and being able to like make it come to life.
Yeah. From
Yeah.
your brain to your
Yeah.
fingertips to the metal.
Yes.
I love that. Do you have any hobbies? And do they complement or contradict your craft?
So I would say my hobbies are metal work. Yeah, so that's pretty much my hobbies. I do like, so there, with my jewelry and some of the tools that I have, sometimes I think my hobby is actually like playing around with metal in a different way. Like I'll like to just, I have like metal stamps, so I'll make fun little things like, little magnets or little, I don't know, little things and stuff, but it's all sort of related to metal, but it's not as serious as some of my other work, but it's sort of just a playful way of working with some of my tools and equipment. That's my hobby. It's
Well,
still metal.
I've also noticed that in the studio, you said that there was 45 other artists that work here.
Yeah.
And also just walking around, it not only is it metal work, you
Yeah.
can probably see other work, but you're also immersed with photography and ceramics and all sorts of other things. So I'm sure just being around here is inspiring, and
Yeah.
you might just give you ideas for something else.
Yeah, and I like being around the other people and seeing what they're working on. And while we all have our own independent studios and our own tools, it's really nice to go over and see what someone else is working on and borrow their tool or ask them for advice, or if they ask you, vice versa. So there's a nice kind of feeling about that in the studio too.
Speaking of advice, would you recommend someone trying to get into metal sculpture to go to school?
I think it depends if they're interested in going to school or not. I don't think it's a necessity. I think there's definitely some skills you need to learn if you're going to specifically do welding and metalwork. So in terms of like going the art path, you may want to take art classes that specialize in sculpture, or you may want to take classes that just specialize in welding so you can become better at the actual craft of welding, which I think that's really important skill to learn.
Yeah. To build on the craft of metal sculpting, do you think it's important to be versed in other forms of art as well?
I think it just depends. I mean, I think it depends on the person. I think like there's no set structure and set way to do one thing. So I think that people learn in different ways and can be exposed to different things. So I don't think it's a necessity to do that.
And what would be your best piece of advice for somebody getting into metal sculpture?
Just do it. It's really fun, and that it's endless what you can do. I mean, I've been doing this for 28 years, and I'm still learning things that you can do with metal and how to manipulate the material. So it's sort of an endless investigation of the material.
Always a student.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's fun. I mean, like I said, it's very evident in this studio. I mean, there's pegs with hundreds of rings of different sizes and shapes that I'm looking at these rollers where she can manipulate the shape of them. There's heat guns everywhere. It's just incredible. So it's fun to hear that you're always learning as well.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about coming in here is always inspiring. Have you ever run into somebody who doesn't understand it? How do you handle criticism?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't understand it. I think it depends on who's criticizing, who it's coming from. So if it's somebody that I really respect their opinion, then I'm gonna take it differently than somebody that I don't.
Sure.
So if it's someone who's like another artist or a friend of mine who's an artist, someone that I really respect and value their opinion, I'm going to think about what they said. I may not agree, and maybe at first I may become in my mind defensive, like I don't agree with that, or that doesn't make sense, but later I may like kind of sit on it and think about it and think maybe they have some good things that they're, to offer, and maybe I should really listen to what that says. So I think it just depends. For outside people who criticize my work or don't understand, I think I've been doing this so long, and I know that I do it for me. It's something that I feel like I want to do, and I really have to do, to just work with my hands and make the pieces. So I don't really give that much thought.
Mm-hmm. Are there any misconceptions about your craft?
Well, I think in general, probably specifically to me, there's a misconception that because I'm a woman, I don't actually do my own work. So there is that misconception. I've had numerous, like I do open studios in my studio where twice a year we open the studio where I show my work, and I've had numerous people say, "Who does your welding for you?" So that's a very that's a very strange and terrible misconception, that because I'm a woman I don't do my own work. So there's that. And then in terms of just in general the material, I'm not sure what the misconceptions would be. I don't know. I'm sure there are. I can't think of anything else like offhand right now.
That's all right. Well, yeah. I'm here to say that you are a kick-ass woman who makes all of your pieces by hand.
Thank you.
So please check it out. Off the top of your head, do you have any funny, interesting stories or events that have happened with your craft?
Let's see. Yeah, so this is very random, but because of my metal work, I was actually like on a reality TV show. So that was pretty random and weird.
Where can we see you?
Well, it was an old show. It was actually on the Food Network.
Okay.
And it was it didn't last, but I think it was only 1 or 2 seasons. I was on one episode, but the premise of my episode was they took a welder, a cake maker, and a chocolatier, and they paired us together on a team, and we competed against other teams and had to create something based on a theme, and our theme was Daredevil Sports. So yeah, it was very random, very weird. I went to LA for a week to film And I met my two co-competitors that I was with. I'm still friends with one of them, and the other one we're friends, like on social media. But anyway, it was a very interesting and strange experience to be a part of. But that was through my metalwork.
I'm just interested in the product. What did you create?
Yeah, so ours did like a scene. It was a cityscape with someone doing base jumping off of a building. So I made all the infrastructure, like this huge tower that was covered in chocolate and cake. So I made the interior like model for that, and then I made a sculpture that was covered in chocolate, and then made some other elements that they kind of put elements into, like these huge fireworks. Part of what we had to do, part of our challenge was it had to have fire in it. So I made these metal fireworks that I had cut out, and then they put fire through them. So anyway, that was a really strange and interesting experience that came through my metalwork.
Huh.
Yeah, very different from what I normally do.
Would you be interested in collaborating with other types of craftsmen in the future?
It depends on who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so potentially, but it has to be like the right fit, and our work has to sort of feel like it fits together.
Yeah. You gotta have the same.
Yeah, and I need to be interested in what they're doing and what I'm doing, and so it wouldn't just be an open-ended yes.
Speaking of, what is next for the world of metal sculpting?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's just continuing to learn more about the material and refining what I'm doing. I'm really investigating working with bronze, so kind of seeing what else I can do with that. And right now, what I'm working on a lot is like manipulating the circles and folding them and bending them to give them more movement. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
I'm pretty lucky right now. I'm looking at a bunch of them that she's been playing with to figure out the right vibe, and they're really cool. I kind of want to steal one. And what's next for you personally? You want to work with these bronze a little bit, but what's the dream? Where do we want to go? Where does Rebecca Fox Studio want to go?
I just want to keep being able to be physically able to work. It's a very challenging medium to work in. There's a lot of physical aspects of it, so just hope that my health continues to be good for endless amounts of time, and then just be able to come to my studio every day and just work and make pieces. I want to continue to explore the series that I'm working on, so I'd like to make some larger pieces that kind of have the the balance and the flow of the folded kind of bent metal, and kind of explore that a little more.
How long does it take to make a piece?
So it depends on the piece. Every piece is different. I typically never work on a piece from start to finish. I typically work on multiple pieces at a time. So I'm kind of going back and forth between, maybe I'll work on 3 at a time or 10 at a time. So it takes various amounts of time. A piece could take a few weeks. It could take a few months. It really depends. Since I do so many different sizes and styles of work, it really depends on which piece it is.
And where can we see your work?
So my work right now is at the Contemporary Jewish Museum. So I have 2 pieces in the exhibition there. And then I have a show where I'm making 16 small sculptures. That's in San Francisco. My work you can see it online on my website, on social media.
Which is?
My website is my name. It's RebeccaFox.com. And my Instagram is Rebecca Fox Studio.
Wonderful. Anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I want to say that for me, what I did was I wanted to become a better welder so I could learn more about the actual craft side of doing the art. So I worked as a welder in a metal fabrication shop for a couple of years, not doing anything artistic, but we made all of the display fixtures and frames for all the Pottery Barn stores. And we also did architectural metals. So I learned a ton of skills working there that I could apply to my art. So I think if someone's interested in doing metalwork, it's really good to learn about the actual fabrication side of it, and because I feel like that can lead itself to, making better artwork.
Yeah, get a good foundation.
Yeah.
Love that. I can't thank you enough for joining me and piquing my interest. I do end with one question.
Okay.
If you could excel at any craft besides your own, what would you want to do?
Well, I want to answer that by saying it would sort of be related to what I'm doing.
Okay.
I actually am interested in blacksmithing, so I've taken a few classes. It's extremely challenging, and I mean, it's still metalwork, but it's different than what I'm doing.
How is it different?
Well, you're taking the material, you're heating it up, you're forging it, you're hammering it, you're using a lot of your physical strength, and also different tools can help you out with that too. But it's just a different style, a different way to make the work. So, I mean, that's probably not exactly what you're asking, but it's still in the realm of metal because you can't really get away from metal. So,
Love metal.
yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to all of my peakers out there. Please let me know if you know of any special or unique artists or art forms you think I should explore. I'm currently in San Francisco, California, and can't wait to see where Pique My Interest takes me next. Remember, creativity comes from the heart. Push yourself. Be kind to each other. I'm Scoob Decker, and thank you for helping me pique my interest.
Thank you.